It's a good thing. Okay, this is not going to work. I can't see the Gemara. Okay, we're on Bava and Aleph by the two dots, about 2/3 of the way down. So he said, if Ruvain built a wall and then he made it above Dalet Amos, so Shimon doesn't have to participate for more than building it more than Dalet Amos. Dalet Amos is enough as a Kriya. And then Shimon later on built a wall himself that was opposite Reuven's wall. So it was clear Shimon was building a whole structure there. He's going to use Reuven's wall and his wall to make a new structure. So you say at that point, Shimon has to participate in the extra part that Reuven had built above Dalet Amos that he normally wouldn't be mechuyev on. Amar Rav Huna. Samach lepalga, samach lekula. Rav Huna says it doesn't make a difference whether this second wall that Shimon is building now, whether it's the full width of the wall that Reuven built, or if it's the full height. As long as he built a wall, it's clear what his intention is ultimately. He wants to use the wall that Reuven built, and therefore he has to chip in for the full expenses of that wall. Nachman says no. To the extent he built, maybe he wants to build a smaller shed, and he's only going to build half of the width, and that's why he built this half. So you don't make him pay for the entire wall that Reuven had built, because Shimon built a small section opposite it. Even though Rav Huna says, as long as you did a small section where you're megalgal as a kol, we make the second person building the wall pay his full share of the first wall. He's made a carnival lufta. All these things, there's a lot of taichin here that Rashi has to explain at length. But this one we'll just say over outside, is that where the wall that Reuven had built was, Reuven built a wall that extends the whole distance between their chatzeres. And Shimon had a house that was, oh, good morning, wow, I'm jealous, Dovi. Even though I'm sure you'd rather not have to be kicked out of the bungalow so everyone could keep sleeping, but it's still nice to be outside in the green. But Rav Huna is Maida, the carnival lifta, where Shimon built his section of wall opposite where his house extended off of Reuven's wall, and then by adding on a small section, he made a corner that was fully enclosed, or at least enclosed on three sides. So under those circumstances, it could be that the small piece of wall that Shimon made doesn't indicate that he's going to make a full wall, but he's just, since he already has his house providing one of the walls of this new structure, maybe he's just making a small structure for that corner. So Reminder of Nachman, and on the other hand, Rav Nachman, who said that a person is only responsible, when Shimon builds his wall opposite the wall that Reuven had already built, and that indicates that he really wanted Reuven's wall, that we said he only has to pay for the part that he built opposite. Where if Reuven built a wall, Reuven built a wall first, and then Shimon built a second wall, even if it doesn't span the entire length of Reuven's wall, that if he built a beam that goes all the way across the top of this wall, which makes that which shows that he's planning to make it's like a big girder, and he plans to put the beams, the thinner beams that go across from his wall to Reuven's original wall and make a roof on it. So he's planning to make another second story on top of this because he wants to make obviously a floor. So therefore, we make him already pay at this point for the entire height of the wall, even though he only built against half of it, because he already made preparations in the wall which show that he intends to build more. And the same thing with Kavata de Shuri, where he made holes where he's going to put the beams that go across from Reuben's wall to Shimon's to his new wall. So that means he's going to make a roof, he's going to make a ceiling and a floor, and he's going to build a second story. So then we know that he's planning to finish up the entire wall, and we make him chip in for Reuben's entire wall. Amar of Huni, Amar of Huna. When someone makes makes holes where again he could put these beams that he's intending to put when he's trying to make a ceiling and a roof for the section in between the new wall and the wall that Reuben had already built. It's not a chazak. So Rashi says, Rashi says, Lehavi chazaka, Shimon shegvia kaisel hacholik b'chatzel l'mayla. It's 2 lines up in the narrow lines. Shimon, right, we said Reuben had built the original wall, and Shimon made a second wall opposite. Actually, I'm sorry, Rashi has the opposite case. Shimon was the one who made the original wall. And he made beams, he made holes toward Reuben. In order that Reuben could someday build his wall and he made places that he could make beams across and put the roof on it. Reuben can't say, from the fact that Shimon, when he built his original wall, when he built this wall above Dalet Amos, Reuben says, I must have contributed to that wall. Because if not, why would Shimon have made these holes to make it easy for me to then put in a roof in the area between the 2 walls? We say that's not necessarily the case. That is not a raya. Because Reuben could say, Amalei Shimon, even though not only did he make the holes, but he also made a casing on the inside of the walls for Shimon to place his beams in it. The Amalei, because Shimon, in Rashi's example, Shimon is the one who built this wall with the holes. He'll say, Amina l'chipaisali. In the end, Ruvain is going to want to chip in for this wall because he's going to want to build his own wall opposite. I don't want that at that point to have to start chipping out holes from my stone wall. It's going to come out worse. Reuben can't say that the fact that I've made holes is a raya that Reuben must have chipped in already, because otherwise I never would have made holes to accommodate Reuben's beams. Because Shimon could say, I made the holes just in case someday Reuben's going to decide he wants to use my wall. And at that point, he's going to be mechuyev to chip in for the wall. And if I hadn't put in the holes, it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot better to do it from the beginning than to later get a sledgehammer and start making holes. That's why I did it. But Reuben had not yet paid anything. So now he has to pay for my wall. Okay, so that was one type of chazak. Amar of Nachman, back to the Gemara. Amar of Nachman, achzik l'hurdi, la'achzik l'kshuri, l'kshuri achzik l'hurdi. So now we're talking about a different type of chazaka, and we'll just summarize what Rashi says. Rashi says we're not talking about a chazaka where a person is kind of something with a chazaka. If you hold on to a karka, if you agree, if someone sells a karka, if he makes a chazaka, then that's how he's kind of. We're talking about over here is they had 2 people had a wall. I'm sorry. We're talking about where Reuben had a wall, and Shimon wanted to put beams on top of Reuben's wall, or we find that Shimon has put beams that are on top of Reuben's wall. And the question is, did Reuben sell to Shimon, or just even give it as a matana to Shimon the right to put his beams there? So we say, if Shimon had put the beams there and Reuben did not complain about it, that seems to be an indication that Reuben must have agreed to it in the first place. Because after he would complain about it because it's going to cause damage. So if there's a chazaka that you see that Shimon has already been placing his beams on Reuben's wall, Reuben can't pop up later and say, "Oh, I never allowed this," because you would have complained about it in the first place. So there's going to be specifics about this halach. Amr of Nachman, achzik l'chordi, loy achzik l'kshuri. Just because Shimon all the years has been allowed to put his thin beams and rest it on Reuben's wall, loy achzik l'kshuri. It doesn't mean that now all of a sudden, one day, Shimon has a Home Depot truck pull up with these massive 12 by 12 beams, and he starts putting on top of Reuben's wall. And Reuben says to him, "I don't want you to put these beams on my wall." And Shimon says, "But you allowed me already to put beams on. I had my 2x4s on it." Said, "No, I don't want you to do more damage. That I allow. 2x4s I allowed. I don't allow 12 by 12s. But l'kshuri achzik l'hordi. If he already has the 12 by 12s, he can put the 2x4s on." If Yosef Amar, achzik l'hordi, achzik l'kshuri. Yosef disagrees. He says all beams are the same. Once Reuben allows beams to go on his wall, he doesn't care what type of beams it is. Ikadami Amram Nachman, achzik l'hordi, achzik l'kshuri. L'kshuri achzik l'hordi. Amar, yeah. Achzik l'hordi, achzik l'kshuri, l'kshuri achzik l'hordi. Some have it the other way around, that Rav Nachman was the one who said that once you have a chazaka for one, it's for all beams. And Rav Yosef disagreed the other way around. Amar Rav Nachman, achzik l'natvi, achzik l'shavchi, achzik l'shavchi, lo achzik l'natvi. Now we're talking about different types of rights to have water go into someone else's property. Reuben has a house, and the water drips off his house into Shimon's property. Now, really, Shimon could tell him, "I don't want your water going into his property," but the fact is that he has been allowing it. So there's a chazaka. So Rav Nachman says, if there's a chazaka that Rav Nachman that Reuben is allowed to let his water go off the edge of the roof all over Shimon's property, it's certainly going to be allowed for Reuben to put in a gutter and a drain pipe so it comes into one place. That's better for Shimon. Shimon would rather have it all coming in one place than coming down across the whole length of the house. But if there was a gutter, it doesn't mean that Reuben can switch it and make the water go across the whole width of the house. If Yosef says no, once you have a right, once there's a chazaka that Shimon doesn't mind that Reuben's water is going onto his yard, it doesn't make a difference whether it's all coming in one place or even if it's coming across the length of the house. That Rav Nachman was not machalik. He said it doesn't make a difference which way, once there's a chazaka, it applies to all different types of water dripping. But if Shimon wants to build like a lean-to behind his house, and that creates a tremendous amount of water running off, that he can't do. Rav Yosef says, no, even this lean-to that causes a lot of water, once Shimon has acquiesced to having water running into his property, he can't complain whether it's coming from a drain pipe, whether it's coming off of the roof of the house. I think it's talking about like a flat roof, so it doesn't provide so much water. And even it's Shrifa Durbani, which is on a slant, so it does a lot of water. Whatever the case may be, once he allows water, he doesn't care about the particulars. Out of Yosef Ubda but Shrifa Durbani. Yosef Taka did like this, that he allowed someone to build a tripa d'Urbani once he had a chazaka to have water going into his property. The bira gedayla. Someone who rents an apartment to his friend, a bira gedayla is basically an apartment house. It's a big house that has a bunch of apartments in it. Mishtamish bezizeh u'b'kasleh ad daled amos. Let's say Reuven is the renter. In addition to getting the inside of his house, there's also it's not, these apartment houses are not like our apartment house. It's basically a big log cabin with a bunch of sections. So we say not only is he allowed to use the inside of his house, he could use the outside wall that faces to the Rishus Harabim, to the Chatzar. He could use that part to bezuzeh, means the things that stick out. He could put things on top of the protrusions from the outside wall. We could put a hook on it, and he could use also whatever wall there is there, not just the protrusions, but the wall itself. He could use and the holes in the wall to put his things up to Daled Amos from where his own property is. Now, I imagine this Daled Amos means as long as there's not someone else who has an apartment that has rights to that section. It means if it's Daled Amos into a common area. In addition to being allowed to use the outside of the wall, he could also use the thickness of the wall. On top of the wall, he could place things there. The Makom Shenag. As long as that's what the Minig HaMakom is, that people place things on top of the wall. Aval B'tarbetz Apadni, Rashi really explains to be a lawn. That means there's an entrance way to this apartment building, and they have like a little lawn by the entranceway, and nobody walks on there. So he can't go around to the outside of his house through the lawn. The HOA doesn't allow people to walk on the lawn. They have signs all over the place. So he can't go through the lawn to put his stuff there. It's going to ruin the nice look for the apartment building. Nachum says no. He could the Tarbet Apadni, everyone, even though they want it to look nice, doesn't mean that the person can't use it for his particular uses. But the area behind the house, this is all talking about that you use the chutzner to get to the walls in front of your apartment. But behind the apartment building, no one goes there, and therefore you don't have rights to the wall over there. Rava disagrees. He says even that spot you can use. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I have a deck in my house, and I want to put like a shade over the deck. This is a kind of awning. It's a beam that they would put out to stretch a covering, to stretch an awning over their outside area. So if someone placed such a beam and there was no objection from the owner, Atlas and Yaimin, that means that's not the owner, from his neighbor. He placed it on top of his neighbor's, the person who lives next to him, his wall. Atlas and Yaimin lehavi chazak. If he does it up to 30 days, it's not a chazaka, because this is the kind of thing that's temporary. A person will be very hot in August, and he'll place a beam on his neighbor's wall so he could make some shade for the hot days. So up to 30 days, the guy says, okay, he's just making a temporary shade, so I'm not going to make an objection to it. But once it's already been 30 days that what they call a sail, that shade beam is up, havi chazak. At that point, the neighbor who allowed him to put it, now he has an easement already, and he can't kick him out. If it's on sukkahs, means if a guy made a beam onto his neighbor's property, and it's before sukkahs, it's only as long as sukkah lasts. As soon as a week is up, as soon as it's right after sukkahs, 2 days after sukkahs, the guy still hasn't taken away his sukkah. Now he has a chazakah that he's allowed to leave it there the rest of the year. And if in either of these cases, whether we're talking about the beam used for shade or a beam used for a sukkah, if the person cemented it in place, obviously it's something that is permanent, and then he's going to have a chazaka immediately. Amar Abai, Shnei Batim b'Shnei Tzidei Rishus Harabah. If you have two houses on two sides of the Rishus Harabah, each one has to build a wall to stop the other one, the other guy on the other side of the Rishus Harabah from seeing into his house. They each do half of a wall. If you remember in the first Mishnah, we said if you have two people on two sides of a chutzner, they both chip in for one wall. But over here, that's obviously impossible because they're separated by Rishus Harabah. So either you're going to have to build the whole thing on one side or on the other side, or else what you do like the Gemara says, is each one does half of the distance, half of the wall, and the other one does on the other side of the property. It means on the other side of the opening, he builds the wall, and that way they're each chipping in half. So it's a Michael and the two walls are not opposite each other, because then you'd just be duplicating and you wouldn't have a full protection from viewing in. And they have to make a little bit of overlap, because otherwise you could see in from this side. Taisa says, it's a question because we had this before. Just like we said before, that from a gag to another person's chatzar is a problem because the person doesn't realize when someone's on the gag. So therefore, even though from one chatzar to another, you can't force your neighbor to build. But something where you're not so used to the person seeing you, it's the same thing with two sides of the Rishus Harabah. You're not going to notice the other guy is looking, and therefore, in this case, they both are mechuyev. Either one could force the other one to build a wall. Because we're going to see later on, between one gag and another, if there's no Rishus Harabah in between, we don't require you to build a wall. It's only because there's Rishus Harabah in the middle. So that makes it's almost counterintuitive. The less likely it is for someone to be in there, the more likely you're not going to notice when he is in there, and therefore causes more damage that the person is going to see you, right? If you're in a regular Rishus, there's no hezek riyah, because everyone knows there's no right to privacy in a public area. But the more private the area is, or the more less likely a person is, the more damage there is, the more likely it is that someone's going to be there and you're not going to think about it. Why does it have to be that the area between them is Rishus Harabah? It should be the same, even if it's an unused Rishus Hayachid. It's an empty lot in between them. It should have the same problem. It should have to, each one could require the other one to build half of a wall. Maybe in this case of Rishus Harabah, in between, each one could say, I don't want to build a wall for hezek riyah, because anyway there's Rishus Harabah, and people from the Rishus Harabah can see into your property, onto your roof. So you're going to have to be careful from them. And even if I build a roof on my side, it's not going to stop it. You could say, no, the Rishus Harabah I can be careful of. I only have to worry about them during the day. But since it's by night, everyone goes into their own houses. But you could be on your roof at any time, so it's always going to cause me problems. You could say also, listen, I'm on a roof, so only if I'm standing, or if I'm standing, they could see me, because from the angle of the roof, from the floor, you can't see someone sitting on the roof. You can only see someone standing up. You have to see over the edge of the roof. But when I'm sitting down, they can't see me. But you were at the same level as me across the way. You could see me whether I'm sitting or standing. Or or Another difference is people in the Rosh Hashanah, they're busy with their going wherever they're going. So they only, if they go look up on top, they're going to see me. But you're relaxing on the other side and your roof. That I need a wall for Hezekiah because you're going to see me just from whatever you're doing. So Amar Mar, Zeh Michael Lechatzi Gaga, Zeh Michael Lechagi Gaga, Lechatzi Gaga, Zeh Shaloi Kineg Zeh Ma'adif. So Gemara Pshita. What do you have to tell me this? What other choice is there? There's no, you can't build a wall on one side, so obviously you have to divide it half and half. So we're like Shricha. The Kadam Chad Minai Ba'avid. One of them went ahead and he built the roof without asking his friend. He just built on his side. Bava Didei. Mao de Tema, Namele Idach, Shkoil Uzikna, Ba'avde Eskula. He could say, maybe the other person, that means one person made half of the wall on his side. Maybe the other person could tell him, listen, you built half the wall, I'm going to give you the rest of the money to build the second half, and you build a full wall on your side. The reason why you don't want to build on top of your wall is because you think it's going to do damage to the wall underneath. And I also don't want to build on my side. So even though let's say Reuven took on to build half the wall without consulting with Shimon, Shimon can say, you go ahead and build the whole wall. If you have a roof that's next to a chatzar, right? Before we were talking about two gagas that were opposite each other, or two chatzers. Now we're talking about a gag that's next to a chatzar. Someone has this courtyard that's higher above ground level, and it's next to a gag. So Chavera Oisel and Maika Gavoya Dalarams. His friend, the person who has the roof, has the gag, has to make a wall to block that the other person can't see into him. Between two gagim, not like we said before, when it's separated by Rosh Hashanah, then we're concerned that the people are not going to recognize that there's someone next to them. But between two gagas, you can't force him to do it. Rav Nachman himself, Rav Nachman said b'shem Shmuel that you have to build a full Dal Amis for Hezekiah. Rav Nachman himself says you don't need a wall for Hezekiah, you just need a Mechitza Asar. Zok Damara, Lamai, what is this Mechitza Asar? To make 10 Tfachim. Ila Hezekiah Arba Amas Bina. Lagabi Hezekiah, you need a full 4 Amas. 10 Tfachim is irrelevant for Hezekiah. Doesn't block the view. Right? You can have a Mechitza around the pool of 10 Tfachim. You need at least 6 feet. Ilin Nitzbisalav Kiganef, if it's just to make a border, so if the other person steps onto your side, you could say, "Oh, you're here to steal things." Then you just need pegs to indicate where the border is. If it's for small goats and kids, then you just need like 3 tvachim. You need a small curb. Really, it's to stop the other person from coming into your property. But if you just made a border out of pegs, the guy could come into your property and he'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that there was a border. My thing fell in here. I was just coming to get my ball that went across." So we have different shatim. He'll say that my thing fell onto your side. I'm here to pick back my own thing. But if he's climbing over a 10 tvachim wall, he knows he has to call his friend and say, "I'm coming in to get something." He can't just claim, I just happened to be across the border. Mesa, fact one. If someone's chatzah was higher than the roof of his friend, we said he doesn't have to provide a wall. My love, doesn't that mean he doesn't have to provide any wall at all? And we just said he has to provide a mechitza asara. He just doesn't have to do dalat amas, like Rav Nachman said b'shem, like Shmuel said b'shem Rav Nachman. I'm sorry, Nachman said b'shem Shmuel, I was gagal mechitzas asara like Shmuel, like Rav Nachman himself said. Itman, shtei chatzeres, zula ma'ila mizu. You have two chatzeres, and one is a little higher than the other. Amravuna, tachtam bainim mikenegdai. The one on bottom has to build to build it up to the same height as the other person's chatzer. Like we said that they have to build a wall to cover up to cover in between the two reshuyas, right? Va'ayla, and it goes up. The elyon baina mikoneg the va'ayla, and then the one who's on top has to contribute into the wall that goes from that point up. The Chizda says no, the one with the higher courtyard has to help even on the part that's intended to bring the wall up to the level of the top one. Tanya Kavasu der Chizda, but you're right, Rav Chizda. The one on top can't say, I'm just going to build from my section because I don't have to build opposite yours. But rather, he has to help even for the part that's just to get it up to the same height as his property. But if his chatz is higher than the gag of his friend, ain't a zakuk. This is the brisa we said before, that when you're talking about a chatzor with a gag, then he doesn't have to contribute. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue this Hashem tomorrow at 6:30 on Zoom. Shkayach. Have a good day.